All right, we're here at my outdoor worm bin, and last time we fed about 6 pounds of regular compost to boost the microbial life and to increase the volume in this bin. We fed a large colorful feeding of my weekly food scraps, and we're gonna give another large feeding of food scraps and bedding. But first, I want to talk about heat control in your worm bin, especially an outdoor worm bin, and some steps you can take to control it. The first thing you can do is you can feed it a little bit less. Now, for me, that's not an option. I am trying to increase my worm castings, increase the population, and increase the volume. This is a 20-gallon fabric pot that is filled about 1/3 of the way up, and I want to get it to about halfway up, so about 10 gallons of worms and castings and bedding, etc. So in the summertime, when I feed, it tends to heat up by about the end of the first day to the second day. So there's a couple things that I do to cool it down. The first thing I do is I just come in here and mix it all around. It tends to get hot right where the food is layered with the bedding and, in fact, the aged compost that I put in here. And the worms actually go to the edges away from the heat, which is good. If you have a large worm bin, the worms can get away from any kind of heat, so you can feed it more. But that's the first thing I do. About the day after I feed or the second day, I come in here, see if it's warm here, and then I just kind of mix it up and spread it out so that dissipates the heat. The next thing I do is I take ice cubes and I'll put them right on top. And these are just craft ice cube balls that our new refrigerator makes. And what I'll do is I'll open up the bin, kind of let the sun sink the worms down, and then I'll just place these four right on top. And they slowly melt and add cool liquid down, cooling off the worm bin. Another thing I sometimes do, or the third technique I use, is I take water bottles that I have left in the freezer and frozen, and then I'll just set them right on top. And they kind of have the same effect of cooling down the worm bin and kind of dripping off their condensation. But then I can just reuse them. I clean them off and put them back in the freezer and I can start again. But a new technique I'm gonna try is we just have loads and loads of watermelon right now. It's the heat of summer. And what I do is I freeze it. So what I'm gonna try and do is after we feed this tomorrow, I'm gonna break it up again. And then on the second day, I'm just gonna add in one of these rinds of watermelon for about the next couple days until the bin gets to the point where it stays cool on its own. And I have found by about the third or fourth day, the bin is completely cool on its own and I don't need to take any extra precautions to try and keep it down. Again, I'm in the middle of the summer right now in Florida, so it does stay hot pretty long. So let's go in here and see how the bin is doing. We put just a lot of compost. Like I said, it's about 6 pounds of compost, aged compost in here, regular compost. And then we add a pretty good feeding. We also added some toilet paper rolls. So it'll be interesting to see how those do. And the worms are just kind of going in and out of them really well. And they've kind of torn them apart. I left them in whole. I also think I saw a black soldier fly larvae in there somewhere. We'll see if we find more. But let's go ahead and kind of go through and break up any kind of matted down food or see if we have any pockets of fermentation, that kind of thing, because it was a pretty big feeding. We'll also kind of get a look of how many worms I have in here. Now, I guesstimate I have somewhere around 4,000 to 6,000 in here. I had about 6,000, gave some away, and I think they've been able to build back their population after about 2 months. And sure enough, I mean, as I go through, each handful just has oodles and oodles of worms. And right here looks like a skin from a tomato. We put tomatoes in here, we put apples, we put strawberries, we put lettuce stalks, all kinds of great foods. And they eat right through the flesh and kind of take this tomato skin and eat it up last. I'm gonna go in from the outer edges, and last time we went from the outer edges in, there were a lot of worms out on the edges, and sure enough, same thing. And it's been raining all day, and this bin does a good job of kind of shedding the water as it rains and just absorbing just a little bit. So that might be why they're out here. This, I think, is part of an apple core, and the worms are all in and out of it. I find in my worm bins, apples take a little bit longer, and it's been 11 days since we were in here. All right, just tons of worms, kind of uniformly throughout. This, I think, is a pine cone that came from our regular compost that we put in here. And again, I just want to talk about that regular compost. That regular compost was sitting out of the regular compost pile for about 4 months. So it was completely aged, cooled down, that kind of thing. I wouldn't want to put hot compost into my worm bin, although I kind of make a little hot compost pile with the food I put in here. Check it out. Check out these red wigglers right here. Just really great size. I mean, they are fat. We're also seeing some babies and juveniles, but just in that handful, just a lot of adults. This right here looks like maybe a bit of a stem from that compost that I put in here. I expect to see a lot more kind of natural things in here now that I've added compost. This looks like an avocado pit that has been in here for a while. I'm gonna squeeze it and you'll see the orange that you typically see from avocado pit, but they are starting to take it apart. So just help them out there a little bit. We'll come to this side. You know, I put in a lot of cardboard, also a lot of shredded cardboard, and I don't see too much of it. So that increase of volume really did this bin good, and these worms were obviously hungry for it. Here's a peach pit that I've had peach pits in here, and they last forever. The last time that I had one in here for a long time, I took some pliers to it and busted apart. So maybe the next video I'll do the same thing, but that was pretty fun. I'll put a link to it. It was an explosion. It was pretty wild. All right, here is some banana stock that's been in here probably, I would say, at least 2 months. And then it ends up going into these fibers right here. And the worms sometimes hide in there. I don't know if we'll see one, but they'll take a while to finish that off. And then come around here. As I'm doing this, I'm not just kind of playing around. I'm aerating it out, like I said, to make sure there's no pockets of fermentation or anaerobic activity. The worms need to breathe, and the good bacteria that helps them digest their food are aerobic bacteria that need oxygen. So any pockets of anaerobic activity will repel the worms and the microbes that they need to help them. Here's a little baby right here. You can even see its orange tail and then pink all the way to the end of it. Keep going here. Another one of those toilet paper rolls. And they really like to eat both carbon and nitrogen. So the carbon is going to be your shredded cardboard. I mostly use shredded cardboard with a little bit of shredded paper. And occasionally I'll put in these toilet paper rolls whole, but usually I will shred them up. But they eat both, so it's important with each feeding you add food scraps, and carbon. All right, we'll just do the back half here. See what we got going on here, and then we will set up for our feeding. Now, worms have a carrying capacity for whatever volume they're in, with the amount of food, that kind of thing, that they won't overbreed past that. So you're not just gonna get an infinite number of worms in your bin. They're gonna reproduce till they get to the volume and the food that can sustain them, and then their reproduction will equal about their casualties. All right, last edge here. That must have been where they all were, probably because I've been digging around here. But yeah, just look at that. Just a great number of worms. So I usually feed in the center, so I'm gonna make a hole here. And then the first thing I do is put in some more bedding. And sometimes I find some of the stuff that we found and put that in the middle. And then we'll get to it. So I'll start on the bottom with some of this shredded cardboard, and I do have a couple of paper towel rolls. And one of the things I wanted to talk about with the heat was, if you put in a massive feeding and you only check every 2 weeks and you don't come in here and check on your worm bin, you might never even know that your worm bin got hot. The first 3 or 4 days, it generates heat, the worms go away to the side, and then after it cools down, it comes in and eats all the food scraps and the bedding that you put in here. You can be as active or inactive with your worm bin as you want, as long as the size is big enough for the worms to get somewhere where they're away from the danger of the heat. So here's what we had in mind for a feeding today. This is just about a week's worth of food scraps. We've got some avocado peels, we've got some banana peels, we've got some tomatoes, lettuce stalks, we've got some sweet potato leaves from the garden. So we're just gonna dump that right in. Some strawberry stragglers. So let's just kind of push this around. Really colorful feeding. Now these, well, I already dumped a little bit in there, but these avocado shells end up being like worm hotels. The worms just love the flesh inside, and then they just gather. And you'll see probably by the next video, this will be full of castings. So I'm gonna put that in there, just kind of move this around. And then because I'm trying to add more volume, I'm just gonna add a lot of shredded cardboard here. Usually I harvest this bin every time I feed it, but we didn't do that today because, again, I'm trying to increase the volume. And you know what I forgot? You probably already thinking about it, but I forgot to put in the pulverized oats that I have been putting in lately, kind of a worm chow, and I forgot to put in the pulverized eggshells. but I don't think they mind where it goes. I'm just gonna dump them in. So in goes some pulverized eggshells that were just expired and found in my pantry. Dang it, 2 videos in a row I called those eggshells and I meant to call them oats. Here are the pulverized eggshells. Thanks, executive producer, for helping me out there. Here's the pulverized eggshells. They use it in their gizzards to grind up their food. They have gizzards kind of like birds do. And then finally, I always add a little bit of coffee and tea grounds. These are spent, already used, and it just adds another food source for them. And since I've dumped all that stuff on top, I think I can just add some ice cubes right here. They really don't need it because all that food is still partially frozen and cold, but this will help to add a little bit of moisture. Not necessary. Usually I'd wait a day for this, but we'll just go ahead and add that. And then finally, I'm just gonna cover everything up. I'll probably just do the edges right to here, and then I'll cover the rest up with the bedding. I really liked how they went through that and turned it to castings pretty quickly. I think they're gonna do the same thing. This is a hungry bin. And this is just one of my bins. I have a tiny worm bin that's an indoor bin that I do all kinds of different things with, and it runs very differently than this. So if you're in an apartment or townhouse, something like that, a tiny worm bin might be more up your alley. And then I have a worm tower, which are really great for beginners and experienced worm farmers alike. And I really like that. Do different things and run that a lot differently than either of my bins. So go ahead and check those out. So we'll top this all off with some more bedding. And these last 2 feedings should do a really good job of increasing the volume. I think I'm gonna go at least one more before I start harvesting every week again, and then I'll be back to my assembly line of producing castings. So I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope your worm bins are going well. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.